I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, on whose land, traditional land, we're now sitting, and we gather this evening, pay respects to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors that you've seen the commercials for, and Councillor Jackie Watts from the Melbourne City Council. The middle commercial, Discover What You Don't Know About Melbourne, is here. There's a message about twittering. You've got to turn your phones off to silent, but if you'd like to Twitter, do so. The hashtag is #UOMFOI, University of Melbourne Festival, etc. And in the front row, James Gray, who's the very tall president of the Melbourne University Debating Society, is going to, in a sense, curate the Twitters and stick his hand up every now and then and say, we've had an interesting one, and so-and-so wants to know something. That's in the discussion period. We're going to be very tough on time, and so with 2 minutes to go, if required, I'm going to stand up in that seat and wave like mad to the speakers, and when they've got 0 minutes to go, I'll start marching up and drag them off bodily. Our first speaker is the renowned Stephanie Alexander. Melbourne's the last biggest small town of 4 million people on earth, and I said to Stephanie, when were you in that restaurant in Lygon Street? And she confessed it was 1966, so I've known Stephanie since then, Melbourne being a small town. And what Stephanie's done since she's stopped being a chef and restaurateur is fantastic. Her kitchen garden program is currently in 270 schools. In 2.5 years' time, it will be in 770 schools, 10% of the schools in Australia. It's been audited, it's been reviewed, and it's making a difference. Stephanie, you're on.
John? Whoosh. Thank you very much, everybody. I see a very clear path from when I first became interested in everything to do with food to where I am today, still passionately interested and now wanting to influence others. My family moved to a large bush block on the Mornington Peninsula when I was 9, where I grew up, went to school, and enjoyed my mother's exceptional cooking until I left home to attend Melbourne University. Positive modelling is one of the most powerful ways we influence our children. My mother and grandfather took care of the garden, the animals, and the food. My father was the builder, the lover of music and literature. I was 16 before there was any television. Evenings were spent around a table talking, and after the meal, we all shared the task of washing up. Of course, there was no dishwasher. And then we listened to music or to a radio program, or we read books. Every meal would have included some element that had been grown or produced on the property. My mother loved to cook and was very interested in how other cultures prepared their food. The nightly menu was eclectic in its influences. So I grew up taking for granted the existence of a vegetable garden, an orchard, a duck yard, a cow, as well as appreciating the shape of the tea tree and the banksias, and noticing how beautiful was a shaft of sunlight illuminating the fluttering leaves. I also understood that there was always more than one way of preparing something. I'm not here to talk about my life, but my more than 30 years as a restaurateur and my 15 published cookbooks have all been about wanting to seduce others to come over to my way of thinking. Fresh, seasonal food is the best food there is, and you too can have it every day. Choosing to eat good fresh food is certainly about health, but it is also about joy and wonder, and about developing a sensual appreciation of the growing world. It is also about respect for quality and craft. Now my particular passion is to change the way children feel about food and give them the desire and the information and the skills to make better choices. If good food modelling does not happen at home, what chance has a child got against the power of the advertising dollar? And so in 2001, I started the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden Project, which in 2004 became a not-for-profit foundation. Our philosophy is encapsulated in our logo: grow, harvest, prepare, share. And not one of them is seen as more important. We see it as a circle. We developed a successful model and set about finding financial support. Every dollar promised or granted came about as a result of a politician or a bureaucrat or a philanthropist sitting and sharing a meal with a table of 8-year-olds. The model is unbelievably persuasive when experienced in action. And we are very proud that our major supporter is the federal government, together with important partners such as Medibank Community Fund. The Kitchen Garden program is without equal in developing a willingness to experience new flavours and textures, and this happens very, very rapidly. It promotes positive social behaviour as children work together cooperatively. They solve problems and they share experiences in both the garden and the kitchen. The program is completely inclusive, regardless of gender, size, ethnic background, or academic ability. Cultural awareness is inbuilt into the activities as students quickly learn, as I did, that there is always more than one way to do something. Bush food plants are grown in many gardens. Chickens are reared and contribute not just eggs, but an understanding of responsibility and care. We have two models, the ideal model and now the flexible model. We started with our ideal model. Kitchen and garden classes were given every week for an entire grade, delivered by passionate kitchen and garden specialists paid for by the school. Typically, these specialists were not teachers. The classroom teacher then accompanies the grade to the kitchen and the garden. There are currently over 200 schools in Australia currently following this model. 12 years on, however, we have acknowledged that we need to be flexible if we want to welcome more small schools, rural schools, remote schools, Indigenous schools, and schools with low socio-economic profiles. So now, in this flexible model, we train 1 or 2 nominated classroom teachers to take the job of the kitchen and garden educators. Over 150 schools have put their hands up already to start with the flexible model. This model encourages schools to start small, to use donated equipment and recycled materials, to split classes if the available spaces are smaller than the ideal. We feel certain that some of them will gravitate to the ideal model as the program becomes more and more valued in their school and school community. We started with 1 school in 2001. When I wrote this, we had 340 schools. Today we've got 387, and it changes every day as more and more schools and communities put their hands up and say, we want to be part of this. We can now say with pride that any school with a primary curriculum anywhere in the country can apply to join the program. We will train their nominated teachers. We will support them as they build their first garden beds. We have so many resources available, including a marvellous website where they can see and interact with many similar schools. We support teachers at every step of the way, recognising that if it seems too hard, we will lose them. And we also acknowledge that the movement would only grow and endure if it was seen to integrate meaningfully with the general curriculum. Therefore, we commenced the development of brilliant teaching and training resources, both in print and increasingly online. Some of them are on display out in near the registration area. They include tools for teachers, recipes for literacy, our implementation manual, and of course the Shared Table website with its hundreds of resources available with a click of a mouse. Anytime I look at the website on any given day, there's different messages from schools all over the country telling me, or anyone who looks, what they've been doing that day, what they're planning to do, holding a chicken in their hands, showing a salad, whatever it is. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The tools to teachers are intended as prompts for deliverers of the program, and they do have a wonderfully diverse range of activities and topics. I looked at just a couple just to give a little example. One of them had a topic called A Good Egg. Which animals produce eggs and what are they for? And the activity goes on to describe chicken eggs and crocodile eggs and emu eggs, bringing in Indigenous links and history. What happens when heat is applied to the proteins, fats and minerals in an egg? And the content of that activity relates to science, English, history and Indigenous studies in years 5 and 6. There's another one I liked, and in fact I contributed my own Korean homi, which is a type of garden implement some of you will know about. How do tools in the garden relate to physics of the human body? And so you talk about levers and axles and wheels and fulcrum as you're working with a wheelbarrow, a garden fork and spade. All of this is marvellous. A pizza party where the children learn about fractions at the same time as they're actually making a pizza, taking orders for pizzas, understanding different flavours, working out a business plan, and then finally the best bit of all, sitting down and eating it. It's very important that the units that we design are enjoyable as well as informative. I travel to visit schools. I travel a lot. And in the last 9 months, some of the dishes I've enjoyed with the children include sweet potato scones with rosella jam in the Northern Territory, a yabby pizza, which was pretty unusual, in Ungara on the Eyre Peninsula, magnificent green salad with roasted sunflower seeds at Mansfield in Queensland, quinoa and chickpea salad also in Queensland, empanadas stuffed with greens and tamarind seeds at Westgarth, leek tartlets at Elizabeth Downs in Adelaide, a reconciliation pizza made with Indigenous Warrigal greens from Collingwood, and so it goes on. The children are so proud and so capable, and sitting with them gives me goosebumps and brings tears to my eyes. As John said when he introduced me, our current aim is to have the program represented in 10% of all Australian schools with a primary curriculum by the end of 2015. We're well on the way. That is about 800 schools. As of today, about 387. So we've got a couple of big years up ahead. This will equate to influencing around 100,000 children. I would like to see all participating schools embracing fresh seasonal food in all food-related activities at the school. That means fetes and special days, fundraising drives, school camps, breakfast programs, canteens. But of course, if a government adopted school food education as a compulsory part of every child's education, as has just been agreed in the UK from September 2014, there it is to be funded by the big lottery fund, and it is yet to be seen how it will roll out, we would be delighted, and we would be only too happy to work with government to make it happen, and to ensure that the essential values are retained and the fun is not ironed out. We have had 2 formal evaluations of the program. The first was by Deakin and the University of Melbourne, which examined Victorian schools only. The second was national and undertaken by the University of Wollongong. The findings were all positive and are detailed in full on our website. I understand that formal evaluations are necessary for funders. I understand it, truly I do. But for me, to go into a school and to see 100% of the children involved in this program all beaming, all focused, this is their favourite time of the week or the fortnight. To me, this is what education should be about. The team at the foundation is amazing. I have pulled back from the operational side of things other than visiting schools and lobbying, but new connections are happening all the time. One of our team has just returned from Warburton Ranges in the APY lands with a recruitment of 9 schools. There's a cluster of 7 remote schools near Kalgoorlie. Our learning support team is about to work with schools at Alice Springs. We have vibrant programs already operating in some amazing places: Coober Pedy, Bourke, Flinders Island, Darwin, as well as many urban and suburban schools. I urge anyone interested in more detail that can be crammed into this fast 15 minutes to go to our website. It is really enlightening and amazing. I believe, hand on heart, that if every child in Australia could spend time at school growing edible plants, caring for chickens, learning to slice, chop and stir, noticing how beautiful fresh food is, and enjoy eating simple, full-flavoured dishes with their friends, we would be raising a generation who could provide for themselves and their families without anxiety and would be unmoved by the claims of the peddlers of convenience foods most of the time. Thank you. I'll sit down again.
You can sit down again. Stephanie, thank you. Stephanie gave a brief outline of the genesis of her program. I'd like to enlarge on that a little bit because there's a little bit of time. You've got somebody who's passionate and a leader, and she went to the Harold Mitchell Foundation. Harold Mitchell was talking in one of today's earlier sessions and pitched a woo to go from, I think, 1 school to 4 schools. And then the Victorian government took that up. So it was passion, enlightened philanthropy, investment, then taken up by government. And it's a fantastic story and a fantastic way to go. So that was that. The second thing I'd like to say is that Obesity Australia put forward an action agenda for the next budget. And one of the 5 action agendas is not just to get to 10% of the schools, but over 6 years and probably over Stephanie and Angie's dead bodies to make it available with proper government funding. And it's not a vast amount of money to any school in Australia that wants to do it. It will take some money because you have to have replacement teachers for the 2 weeks that the people are being trained. I'd like you to join with me, again, thanking Stephanie for that introduction. Another Melbourne institution, I think it started in Melbourne, although it's probably been copied elsewhere, is the Age Good Food Guide. This has been going for over 30 years. It's almost a Bible. It's a guide for where people should eat and what they should expect, and sometimes for where they shouldn't eat. And Jan Appelgren's been in this space, more or less, talking about food and wine and cooking and so on for almost 3 decades. She's currently editor of the Age Good Food Guide. Jan.
Share the stage with her, especially when it's family tea time as it is now. Like Stephanie, I've got to say that I'm doing what I'm doing now because of early influences. In my case, it was my mum. My mum was a passionate cook. She would throw legendary dinner parties. She would order from the butcher once a week and he would never take any liberties with her. The things would just appear on the doorstep. And she taught me about food. I spent time in the kitchen with her, and watching her cook and mix ingredients together was how I learnt to do what I do now and how I learned a lot about that. I wouldn't be completely honest with you though if I didn't say one thing, and it's admission that as a parent I suspect I have failed because my own children won't eat the ugly fruit and vegetables. And as most of the people in the front row down here know, the ugly ones are always the best ones when it comes to taste. My own mother, a child of the Depression, would have been mortified by the things that they turned their noses up at. But it's one of the commentaries about our life today that the things that they do eat say a lot about the way we eat now. They eat sushi, they eat sashimi, they eat kimchi, habanero peppers, pippies, even cronuts. And they do that largely because of restaurants. Kids used to be stuck in the corner at restaurants, but now they are front and centre. So it does make you wonder whether MasterChef has replaced our mums. I think that when I look around and I talk to colleagues like Matt Preston, a large proportion of those following him and interested in his work are small kids, and they're the ones getting cookbooks in their Christmas stockings, and for that we can be grateful. I was a child of the space race era. I grew up queuing for our astronaut ice cream at the Royal Show. I've got to say that when I grew up, we were told that we would one day eat tablets or powder for our meals. Now, luckily, humans are fairly fickle beings, so we've surprised those early sages by turning our backyards into veggie patches, by returning to baking and preserving, and I think that's a great thing. Sadly, we are still eating 6-month-old tomatoes and snack foods with 100 ingredients in them, most of which are numbers. We're importing seafood with more air miles than a platinum frequent flyer. So how do we, in this era of restaurants, teach the next generation about what they should put in their mouths? Frequently, parents are working. So if they turn to a place like MasterChef, or if they try and emulate the food they're eating in restaurants, is that even a bad thing? We know that in this decade, kids eat out a lot more. I spoke to one of my colleagues today who said that one of the restaurateurs she'd spoken to recently had quite a significant amount of his business come from kids' birthday parties. He was running them in his cafe. We know that kids want baby chinos, that they're asking for the kind of food they're getting in restaurants. Increasingly, with the death of home economics, we've got a generation who know the thrills of tasty, feistily delicious food, but not how it was achieved. So, how we eat out certainly affects the way we eat generally. New York Magazine said recently that in the old days, restaurant audiences, restaurant patrons were older, affluent, they liked opera, they liked golf. Now they're young, they're hip, and if you go into a restaurant that's playing Led Zeppelin, they think it's vintage. A lot of the food in restaurants is not transparent, so there are traps for kids. We know that restaurant food tastes better, but there are many reasons why this is. 2 of them are fat and salt. Restaurant food is full of both. We are about to run a story that says that Guillaume Brahimi's Paris mash is one of the great side dishes in Australia. It has 4 Desiree potatoes in it and 250 grams of butter. At the Provenance in Beechworth, the chips are extraordinary. They are also deep fried twice in duck fat. Michael Ryan admits it's not something he puts on the menu. But restaurateurs are not about to start labelling food. They're having enough trouble dealing with intolerances and allergies. So restaurant food's gone from being an occasional treat to being something that we eat fairly regularly. There are a lot of people who work in the city, and a lot of kids, in fact, who eat prepared food or takeaway daily. Near my office in the city, I cannot buy a sandwich that I can eat on my own. Most of them are 30 centimetres long and filled with things that are probably prepared off-site and delivered in a large plastic bucket. So because of things like that, we have become addicted to taste. With mobility and travel, we are used to eating the food that we experience overseas. Think about the meals of your childhood. Roasts, steamed or boiled veggies, sweet and salty were the biggest taste thrills we had. We've gone from culinary recreational drugs like vinegar and pepper to hard drugs like fish sauce and coconut cream. Now we have hot, sour, sweet, spicy and salty, and often all in the same dish. We're taking food photographs the way we used to take travel photographs. We're becoming more like the countries where street food was something you grabbed on the run from one thing to the next, but we have upsized those street foods from something that was maybe the size of your fist into something that is American-sized. It's full of meat, it's a large serve, and you have something else as well. As my colleague Danny Valance said, a lot of the food that we're actually eating on the run, you could describe it as stoner share house food. This is the food that makes you thirsty, which sells drinks, which often make a restaurant economy go round. As restaurant meals become more of an everyday luxury, we want the same thrills at home. So most houses do now have fish sauce and coconut milk in the pantry. But there is good news. If we're going to learn about eating from restaurants, there are some good things happening. A lot of the chefs that we mentioned in the Good Food Guide have opened their own kitchen gardens. They are choosing to sell sustainable produce. They're choosing to cook and select local produce and organic. And more importantly, perhaps of all, they are choosing seasonal produce. So they're saying, if zucchini flowers aren't in season where we live, we won't actually put them on the menu. We won't put tomatoes that have been in cold storage on the menu. Pioneering restaurateurs like David Chang are also saying we have to eat less protein. And I think there's a dish at one of his restaurants, his restaurant in Sydney, where it's a Wagyu beef dish, but the amount of meat is about a teaspoon. Innovative restaurants like now defunct Loam and Attica are teaching us the pleasure to be found in one perfect marron tail or a simple vegetable, rather than a plate full of prawns. And I often look back to my colleague Jeff Slattery, who says, if you want to learn about cooking and food, start with a sandwich. It's a very simple lesson, putting together flavours, knowing what works and what doesn't. Travel can be a good teacher. If you've tried a tomato in late summer in Turkey, or been through the fish farms of the Mekong Delta, you probably won't be buying the basa at Coles or the midwinter tomatoes. So there are current trends that make us suspicious about food and the source of food, and that's probably a good thing. There are lots of food rules. No carbs after lunchtime, no red wine with fish. But two of my favourite quotes about food are, eat food, not too much, mostly plants, from Michael Pollan. And if you didn't grow it or catch it yourself, know the bloke who did, source unknown. I think that as things like local, seasonal, artisan and house-made become mantras and things of value on menus, it will actually teach us to get our kids thinking more about food, what they put in their mouths. I would like to pass the messages on to my own kids that they should learn to cook at least a handful of things early on. They should occasionally eat things with one ingredient. They should read labels. They should be a bit cynical. They should ask questions, and they should grow things. But most of all, they should continue to eat out and enjoy it. Thank you.
Sian, thank you very much. There are a number of, I think, one-line take-home messages. The one I felt particularly apposite to me was that the ugly ones have got the best taste, so thank you. I think I'd add, not just take your children to restaurants, but make sure you appreciate what they cook in the kitchen. Some positive feedback for kids, even if it's not too flash or could be improved, whatever. Our third speaker is Kendra. I'll find her surname, Parker. Kendra's at the coalface. She's principal of a primary school down in Mentone Park. It's a medium-sized school. And she's done a lot of things before that. She's been in the Federal Police. She's been a senior policy advisor for Queensland Rail. This is a wonderful background for really running a primary school, keeping it on the rails, as it were. Her thing is the Kids CAFÉ, at the school, and her title is Kids CAFÉ, Building a Culture of Healthy Eating. Kendra.
It always sounds much more exciting saying I worked at the Federal Police than when you hear the real story that I was just in the administration there. I didn't get to carry a gun, I just got to hand them out, so, you know. It sounds good though. And I have to say, when I was a kid, my father took me to many restaurants, and my brother and I, and we were always made to go into the kitchen after the meal and thank the chef, so he obviously brought us up well. But anyway, I'm here to talk about our journey of the Kids CAFÉ and how we've tried to, or we have built a culture of healthy eating in our primary school. And we're thrilled to be able to share it with you because we're just a little school in Bayside, Melbourne, and we're pleased to be recognised for the work that we're doing. So our journey started back in 2005. And Mentone Park, like most schools, had a school canteen, and it was run by a private company, and it offered its traditional goodies that the kids loved: chips and lollies and hot dogs and hamburgers and meat pies. So the staff and the parents weren't happy with the nutritional intake of the kids, and they were really concerned, and Jan mentioned it too, that there's less active family life nowadays with so many parents working, which we see a lot of. So busy parents and a busy lifestyle mean less home-cooked meals and less family physical activity. So we embarked on a whole school approach to change eating habits. The first step was to get the right people on board, and a committee of teachers and parents and students was formed. And at the time, the assistant principal, Perry Kick, and two particular parents, Sue Barron and Donna Rodwell, drove this committee. And we knew if we were going to make long-term change, we had to involve everyone and make it relevant to everyone. So we had to, first of all, create the desire to change, and we had to use our skills as educators to do it. So from this starting point, there were a number of activities. First of all, we engaged a children's food educator. So she advised the committee, provided information sessions for parents, and delivered educational activities for our students around healthy eating, nutrition, and healthy lifestyle. We also tied this back for parents about the positive effects that this has on student learning outcomes to really get them involved and get them on board with our project. A lot of other activities happened. There was competitions to name the facility that we were going to open. There were surveys about what kids like to eat and what parents wanted them to eat. There was lots of promotion and marketing, and there was lots of taste testing as we developed a menu. And we formed some important partnerships with the Go For Your Life and Nutrition Australia. So this is our cafe now. So you can see on the left-hand side it was just an undercover area where the canteen did operate, and we've turned it into a proper cafe. So this in itself was a change in attitude immediately. So we went from having a canteen to a kids' cafe. So you can imagine how the kids enjoyed doing that. So when it was established, the cafe had a vision. It was to provide healthy, affordable food that is low in sugar and saturated fat, free from preservatives and as close to nature as possible. We'll help children understand the importance of healthy food choices that can be both nutritious and delicious. And the goal at the time was that we would keep cooking until the eating habits changed and we made $1 in profit. I'm pleased to say that we do make more than $1 in profit now. It takes a while as the year goes on. We do pay a cafe manager, sorry, I'm looking at my notes there, a cafe manager who runs the program, but we put all the money straight back in, which enabled recently, you can see in the photo on the right, recently we had the concrete floors polished and everything. So $10,000 for something like that is a lot of money to come across in a small school, so we keep using the money from the cafe to improve it all the time. All right, so this is our menu. I'm not sure if you can read it, but it sounds pretty nice. So fantastic fruit, tummy teasers, kids cafe yogurt, frozen smoothie bites, super sandwiches, Mrs. Struthers veggie slice, ride-on wraps, pasta and rice, pizza, vegetarian sushi and soup. and smoothies and so on. Everything is made on site, so parent volunteers come in. They'll have a cooking night once a month, for example, and do, I don't think it's on there, the vegetarian lasagna or the cannelloni. So parents will come in and cook it all night, and we'll freeze it, and then it's served as it's until it runs out. The pizzas are made all on site as well. The bases are made by parents each week, come in as volunteers and prepare the pizza bases, and then they're cooked fresh each Friday. We only open one day a week. We rely on a huge number of volunteers, which is getting harder and harder in schools to get volunteers into these programs. We have parents, we have grandparents, we have ex-families, we have ex-students that come back and volunteer their time if they're not at school on a Friday. So it really has become a community environment. In terms of the menu, when it was first put together, there was a discussion around it all, and one of the things that was talked about was that if you gave a child a choice of a healthy food or another healthy food, they really had no option but to choose the healthy food. So as well as the CAFÉ, which runs, as I said, on a Friday, we have a lot of complementary programs. So healthy eating habits is part of our philosophy at Mentone Park. We even start with our preps before they start school. We give a talk about what healthy lunch boxes look like, and we have all the parents and the preps taste test the menu before they start school the following year. So when they start, they know what to expect. We have special days such as Sandwich Day, where we put all the ingredients out and the whole school goes through and makes their own sandwiches, and we talk about the importance of putting what you can put in your sandwich and flavours and so on. So lots of options. And every year on their birthday or the anniversary of the CAFÉ, we have a special day where the kids on our Kids CAFÉ committee will make something special that can be ordered as a one-off. Excuse me. We also in our classrooms have Snack Attack, which is where children can eat fruit any time in the morning if they're feeling the need for it, and they can also have water bottles in their classroom that they can access at any time. We have a green gang at our school, and it's really one of the most prestigious things to belong to, either the Kids CAFÉ committee or the green gang. And the green gang coordinate all of our environmental activities. So we have a veggie garden and we have a fruit orchard. We don't have chooks yet, but we just one of our students won a grant, so we're in the process of building a chook shed. So the Green Gang is a really big program, and then we have the Garden to Gourmet program. So everyone from prep to grade 6 has a cooking program that they do with their class teacher, and parent volunteers help that. But in year 5 and 6 we run this restaurant program. So each term, for term 1, 2 and 3, the students in grade 5 and 6 learn to cook a different course, so an entree, a main course and a dessert. And then in term 4, they're allowed to invite one special person, and the CAFÉ is set up as a restaurant. And you can see there they cook the meals for all the special guests, and they have to serve them, and then they have to clean it all up as well. And we have a gardening club which operates 2 lunch times per week, so we've got some very committed teachers that do that voluntarily in their lunch breaks. And we're really lucky that we have family support on holidays and weekends and working bees that will come up and keep the garden going through those times when the students aren't at school. We also offer a program called Passionate Pursuits, which teachers get to teach what they're passionate about to the kids once a week, and the kids sign up for it. It's like an election program. So in that we have a fitness program, a cooking program, a sports program, environmental studies and a gardening group. So all of this supports the whole culture around healthy eating. So you can see our beautiful gardens there and some of the work that's been harvested. When we do harvest fruit and vegetables, if they're not used in the CAFÉ, we do sell them at a market to parents after school on a Friday, and just a gold coin donation, and it all goes straight back into the garden as well. So the Kids CAFÉ is now an integral part of Mentone Park Primary School. It's well and truly embedded in our curriculum, and it really defines our unique identity. As I said, we have a committee, and in Year 6, as well as having house captains and school captains, we do have Kids CAFÉ captains as well. And they coordinate the kids that are volunteering, they do announcements at assembly, they help the parents set up. Some of them come in at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning to help with the cooking and preparing food. So, because everything, the muffins, the Anzac cookies, the pizzas, the soups in winter are all cooked every Friday fresh. So it's not just a facility for lunch orders anymore. It's a place for socialising, It's about learning etiquette and eating out. It's about purchasing your own food, so giving kids those skills and using their manners. And it's about community building. As I said, we have parent and grandparent volunteers. And the other wonderful thing is that we actually open the cafe from 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, so parents or grandparents that are coming up to pick up their kids can come in and have a cup of coffee and a muffin and sit and chat in the cafe while they wait for the bell to go at 3:30. And then when the kids come out, we keep it open till 4 o'clock. So children play in the playground, mum and dad might buy them, a hot chocolate or something to eat after school, and we take orders for weekend food as well. So you can order a dozen muffins or different things to take home for your dinner on the weekend or your snacks. So it really is a whole school approach. We're very proud of what we've achieved and that we continue to achieve. We're looking at what we can do next with our concept, and one of the ideas we've come up with recently is to do parent cooking classes. So parents can come in and learn to cook the meals and the items off our menu that they could cook at home as well. I guess the best thing that sums it up is that we often have high school students come back to Mentone Park, and I remember one that said, his mother said to me, he was so excited when he went to high school. He said, "Mum, you should see the canteen there. It's got hot dogs and dim sims and all this wonderful stuff we never had at primary school," and kept taking his pocket money. Anyway, she said it only took about 4 weeks, and he came home and he said, "Oh, Mum, you know what? That canteen's horrible. I much preferred the food at Mentone Park." So we think we've done a pretty good job of creating that culture of healthy eating. So thank you.
I have only 2 grandchildren that live in Melbourne. One is 2 and the other one was born in May. And they live in Fitzroy, and it's a long way to go to Mentone Park. But I hope when they're going to primary school, they go to the sort of school that Kendra is running, because it's a sort of totality. It's not just serving, a cup of cold tea and a quince on a Friday. It's doing the whole thing right across it. So, Kendra, congratulations. Karen O'Day is much younger than I. I knew a mother who was a fantastic school principal, very close to here in South Melbourne. And Karen and I, in a sense, grew up together. And she's done terrific things. Been an institute director of the Menzies Institute in Darwin. She's lives in Melbourne and has an appointment at the University of South Australia, etc., etc., etc. She's really been a leader in this area, but also particularly as it pertains to our Indigenous population in Australia. Her topic is the economics of food choice and the implications for health. Karen.
Hardly much younger, but anyway, we won't split hairs there. Although I think when I was very young, I thought John was much older. It sort of changed with time. Inspiring stories that we've heard. And what I'm going to talk about is why this is just so important. I've worked in Indigenous health now for more than 30 years, and the health problems in terms of chronic disease, just like in Australia more widely, are getting worse, not better, in terms of diet and lifestyle-related chronic disease. Early onset type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease, and I mean people in the 20 to 50 year age group having 10 times the rate of these conditions than in the rest of the population, and it's increasing in the rest of our population. In the worst affected communities, 100-fold higher rates of kidney failure.
There's also a heavy burden of infectious disease, which really interacts, I think, in a really toxic way with these other chronic diseases. So, wrong way. It wasn't always like this. And in fact, it's still in some very rare communities, in very isolated places, there are people like this man, very healthy, and until about 50 or 60 years ago, no evidence at all of lifestyle-related chronic diseases. This is an epidemic that has just burgeoned in a very short time. I'm badly programmed here. So the contemporary diets are very different from what we've just been hearing about. Very high intakes of processed foods and beverages, lots of sugar. 30% of the energy and more in some communities comes from sugars. It used to come as solid sugar that used to be put into tea and put onto oatmeal porridge, rolled oats in the morning. It now comes primarily from processed foods and particularly sugar-sweetened beverages. Huge consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages in remote communities. Highly processed, nutrient-fortified white bread is a major source of a whole lot of nutrients in remote Aboriginal communities. Now, this is really serious. Protein, it's an appalling source of protein, really, and particularly when you think that these people were hunter-gatherers. They were hunters, they ate very good, high-quality lean meat. But this is what the food industry is doing. It's adding popular nutrients into otherwise highly processed foods. And there is absolutely no guarantee that they are anywhere near as effective. Certainly, getting your iron from bread is a very inefficient way to get your iron. And energy-dense takeaway foods. Very low intake of all the things we've been hearing about today. Oh gosh, I'm really hopeless, aren't I? Now, there will be only a couple of people in this audience that would actually recognise the person in this picture, but it was 30 years ago. And I had actually probably been 5 or 6 weeks at that stage living on a hunter-gatherer diet myself. I've never been so lean and I've never been so tanned. But it was a most fantastic experience, and that has driven my work ever since, because I learnt so much in that 7 weeks living with those people, looking at how people lived traditionally. And it probably couldn't happen today. Why is it that, I'll just go back for a moment, why is it that the food supply has not changed really in 30 years? The types of food have changed, but the quality of it is just as bad. And one of the things I'm very interested in is the economics of food choice. That maximises calories per dollar. It reduces food spending by changing quality before quantity, because people want to be fed, they want to feel full. Overeating when food is available, and women in particular are very disadvantaged because they will restrict their own intake to protect their children. And this is the kind of schematic that we see. The cheapest foods are the fats, oils, sugar, white flour, confectionery, that type of thing. The expensive foods are the ones over on the right-hand side. And it's a huge differential in cost between healthy food and really poor quality food. And this is real data from one of the communities we've worked in. This is published data. And there's no need to read it, but the foods that people rely upon are the cheap, filling foods. And that's why white bread in particular is so important. But actually it's reflecting our own food supply more widely in Australia, not probably for this audience, but for many in our society. The large transnational food companies, which are everywhere. And we've heard this morning how they're concentrated power. You have a whole lot of different brands, but you don't actually know they're all part of the same huge multinational. And economic and social systems are favouring increasing availability and affordability of these foods. They're basically rich in sugar, salt and fat. And they're also in other refined carbohydrate. They tend to be low in protein. That's a very interesting issue, which I won't have time to talk about. And they're fortified with popular nutrients. They're highly profitable. because they have low production costs and a long shelf life. So this is the way our food supply has moved. And this is the data from the United States. We don't have this same data for our country, but it would be very similar. The obesity epidemic began in earnest in about 1980. Now, look at that. This shows the consumer price index in the United States has gone up, is that middle black line. And the top line is fresh fruit and vegetables, gone up much, much more. And carbonated drinks have actually relatively gone down, and so has sugar and confectionery. And it's a very, very interesting story. So this is what is underpinning the economics of food choice. If you don't have much money, you are actually able to fill yourself better on processed food than on fresh foods. So primary prevention is critical, and we can't treat obesity once it's established. It's very hard to treat it. You can have surgery, yes, but that's really not an option for literally millions of people that are overweight and obese. And overweight and obesity is driving the epidemic of both diabetes and cardiovascular disease, not just in Aboriginal communities, but and in Torres Strait Islander communities, but much more broadly. So primary prevention has to begin early in life, and this is why these programs that we've heard about today are so fundamental. In fact, I think it has to begin pre-conception myself, and it has the centrality of maternal and child health. And I've been a person who's worked on adult diseases for most of my professional life, but I am now recognising how important it is to intervene absolutely early. I haven't got time to tell you about all the little projects that have been done over the years that have been successful, but then they stop and everything goes back. There is an urgent need for system-level change. And this is my last slide, and what I'm proposing here are three opportunities, and I would absolutely love it if every remote school had a kitchen garden. I think that would be fantastic. But if we start with the store, many communities have a single store. That provides a really great opportunity for trialling innovative new practices. Price discounting on healthy foods. There's a big project going on now that one of my colleagues at the Menzies School of Health Research, Julie Brimblecombe, is leading. And she's doing a 20% discount on fresh fruit and vegetables and low joule drinks. I'm not actually very supportive of the artificially sweetened drinks, but that's another issue. But we haven't been able to put taxes onto any unhealthy products at this stage. Healthy takeaways, financial support, like a frequent flyer card, if you like, giving reward for healthy purchasing. These are some of the ideas that we should consider. Schools and preschools, incredibly important settings for change. Kitchen gardens, healthy canteens, and wonderful examples of this being absolutely integrated into the curriculum. I actually think horticulture and cooking ought to be compulsory subjects. They ought to be seen as core disciplines for our healthy survival. But the other thing I'm proposing down at the bottom is a bit more controversial. I actually think that for very disadvantaged people, wherever they are, we need to link healthy food into the primary care system. And I'm proposing here that we can have the prescription of healthy food funded by the PBS. We spend a huge amount in the PBS on people when they're ill, a huge amount. And it would be far more cost effective, and we have to do the sums on this, to actually support them to remain healthy. Thank you. I'll stay up here.
If you like. Okay. Karen, thank you. One of the other things about the economics is people talk about fast foods being cheap. It's certain they're fast. You can drive past and pick up a $20 family pack. But you can actually make a much healthier and I think probably equally delicious meal for $10. You've got to have vinegar and salt and pepper and so on. You can't do it in a totally empty kitchen. But I think one of the economic really important things, is that fast foods are not cheap. I'm not talking about long-term implications, I'm talking about money in the wallet. Okay. What Karen's talking about is terribly important. Not in the Indigenous community, but in this community here, in Victoria, most obviously, in fact, in South Australia and Queensland, 25% of adults over 18 are obese and 40% are overweight. Overweight is the new normal. The normal BMI now is 27, which is plumb in the middle of the classic 25 to 30 BMI range of overweight. It's not all disaster. Australian men between the ages of 40 and 60, the third most overweight group of men in the world, and the only people who are healthier in terms of mortality than that group are the equivalent group in Iceland, which has got 300,000 people and is really not easy to compare. We've actually gone past Japan. So there are some consolations, and I think we need to obviously address this epidemic, but on the other hand, it's not really panic stations as yet. I'd like now to introduce Ange Barry. Ange is the CEO of the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden Foundation, and she's going to join the panel. It's very important that if you meet Ange, you don't try and shake her by the hand, because she bust her arm coming off a motorbike and it's still not properly healed. So you can give her a hug, you can high-five her left-handed, but don't try and shake her hand. If the panellists, the speakers, plus Ange, would come up and array themselves, they've under instructions as to where they're going to sit, because the microphones have got to be turned on and off, and that's terribly complicated, and almost certainly will lead to disaster. While they're coming up, what I'd like to do is, on behalf of Melbourne University, to thank all the people who've come, but also the people who've made these programs possible, the volunteers, the organisers, etc. It's really, I think, been immensely successful, and from Fiona Stanley down, I think we owe a debt of thanks to all those people. Okay, guys, up you come. Be careful.
It's bright up here, isn't it?
I'd like to ask people, when they stand up, to ask a question, to do two things. One, to say who they are, and if it's appropriate, give their appropriate institutional affiliation or whatever. The second thing is not to stand up and make a long, complicated statement about your experience or the way you're going to fix the world. This is basically a question and answer session. And stick your hand up. I need to have dark glasses or so on. But the first question, because I was primed before we began, is going to come from the 11-year-old Lara Joyce, if she's still here. And the third thing I should say is you've got to wait till you get a roving microphone. Lara, your question. Say who it's to, who you are, and take it away.
My question is to Stephanie Alexander. I would just like to ask, what inspired you to create such a successful program?
What did I do?
What inspired you?
I think I'd have to say my parents, and also because I can see that it works. So that every time I see another kid tucking into a silver beet and potato pie and saying, yum, I want a second helping. I think got to do more of this.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, thanks. James? James Gray is president of the Melbourne University Debating Society, and he's the person who's taking the Twitter feeds and going to curate them, but then relay them, because this has gone out live. James.
This tweet is directed to the entire panel, and it is the need for fantastic programs like those of Stephanie and Kendra reflective of social failures of parents to raise their children properly?
Whoa. I think I would refer that first to Jeanne.
Well, I'm not going to put the blame as a parent at any parent's feet. I think that there are a whole lot of pressures from society that make it really hard to teach your kids to eat well and to encourage that. And it does take work and it takes time, but no, it's not solely the parents' fault. It's much more complex than that.
Somebody else like to come in on that? Karen.
I think parents are under huge amount of pressure. Their children are. The advertising, the promotion, the targeting of these foods towards children is absolutely outrageous. And the industry denies it. They deny even that they're targeting. They clearly are. People say, oh, advertising isn't effective. Well, why do you spend billions on it? And I think there are huge pressures on families, and I really don't think that, it's fair to say they have to be overcome by parents.
We've got a question here.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Cole. I'm a mother and a raiser of cook children. I've just got a question about actually Jan touched on it when you were talking about the restaurants and how they have to deal with allergies, which seems to be an increasing problem. So I just wanted to know from everybody what effect you've had or what effect you've seen of healthy eating on allergy, the incidence of allergies, and especially in Indigenous communities.
Well, we'll start with the Indigenous. Karen.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that I can answer that question. This would probably be a better question for Fiona Stanley. That I have not seen, I've not heard people talk of food allergies in the Indigenous communities that I've been into. So, but that might be because of a very narrow range of foods that people are eating, relatively speaking. So, Fiona, what would...
Well, I think it's an incredibly good question. We should have asked it this afternoon.
Yeah, we should have.
At the children's the session on food allergies. My feeling from the presentation that Sue Prescott gave, that a healthy diet, particularly very early, is going to be protective of the development of food allergies. Not only because that getting in early is obviously going to increase our capacity to cope with our immune system is going to be stronger and so on, but I actually don't think we know the answer to that question, and it's a very good one, and we should have put it to the expert panel this afternoon. We'll take it back.
One of the things is that in the Aboriginal communities I've seen, the kids play in the dirt, there's a lot of dogs, they don't get heaps of antibiotics, at short notice. Their gut microbiome, the bacteria and viruses, organisms in their gut are actually likely to be quite good. Taking a child from hospital after it's born home to a home with a dog means that it's only about 10% as likely to get asthma as a child taken to a home without a dog. Now, I'm not going to go into how the dog's microbiome and its gut bacteria, etc., get transferred to the child. I'll leave that to your imagination, but that's the case. So I think in some senses the Aboriginal children, because there are dogs all over the place.
There's an awful lot of gastro and failure to thrive still and poor growth in Aboriginal communities. So I wouldn't paint too bright a picture of it. But
in terms of allergies, it's probably fine. One over here. We've got a very good lady with
Hi, my name's Tegan. I'm a medical student at the University of Melbourne, and I was just more towards the programs in schools. What kind of strategies have you come up with when kids are against eating healthy food and don't want to eat certain vegetables or fruits and have a real thing about saying, no, I'm not going to get involved? How do you tackle that issue?
Perfect. Is that a question to us, or that's good?
Well, I think a number of people could address that. Kendra, you start.
Yeah. Well, our CAFÉ, for example, is only open one day a week, and we've got just over 290 students in our school, and we average 210 lunch orders. So kids are generally taking up the option on a Friday of eating a healthy lunch. Our prep teachers, we start, as I said, before kids even start school, we start educating the parents and the students about when you come to school, what you can bring to school that's healthy to eat. And we don't, ultimately parents have the say in what they put in their child's lunchbox, but certainly at our school, we put it on the parents as well through our education programs about the importance of healthy eating, that we very rarely see kids with not healthy foods in their lunchboxes. It's discouraged, but it does still happen. We haven't wiped it out totally.
I think that what happens in the kitchen garden schools is that because the children actually make the food themselves, they're there processing their beetroot dip, deciding how much yogurt wants to go in it, tasting it, does it need lemon juice, does it not, asking their friend, taste this, and then they put it on the table and it looks beautiful in a bowl, and they've got flatbread or they've pita crisps or something around this, and they say to the other people, and somebody looks at it and it's the most, brilliant purple, and a child on the table says, no, I don't think so. And this one who's made it is inclined to say, but I made that, and that really tastes fabulous. And we find that within weeks, and I mean weeks, not months, not years, every child eats everything.
One of the other things I've appreciated about this Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Garden program is that actually they transfer it to the parents too. And so it's not just what they eat.
Significant trickle down,
trickle up,
home.
back, whatever. Yeah.
Trickle up.
Yeah.
And can I just say one other thing, John, about the parent thing? Because whilst I acknowledge that parents are under great pressure and have the advertisers are going full bore at trying to influence children, the parent presumably makes a choice as to what sort of bread the family eat. And somebody makes that choice. And so if you grow up from the time you're 1 eating rye bread or wholemeal bread or having your mum make your own bread, you don't get terribly excited about white sliced bread ever.
The awful thing is that a lot of families don't have that.
Exactly.
Don't have that experience.
That's what I'm
and
saying.
the cheapest
early
bread
modelling
is the highly processed bread.
Well, the whole grain bread at the supermarket I go to is the same cheap price. It's not very good, but it's much better than white sliced.
It's called wholemeal and it's about 45%.
No, it's whole grain. It's full of, wheat and break your teeth and stuff. We've got a question here.
Yes, hi, my name's Frank, father of 2 and someone equally passionate as yourselves. I'm interested to know, particularly for children, is there either research or your intuition with your experience that tells you what the right age is to capture children's hearts and imagination, given children can be so easily seduced through what they see on TV and in books?
I think from birth.
No, yes, from birth, but Karen made a very important point that there's now increasing evidence that what happens pre-conception may actually drive the possibility of an offspring winding up obese. Certainly there are a range of things, external environmental inputs during pregnancy that will do that, and then in the first 3 years of extrauterine life, which is when the taste patterns and food preferences are set for many kids. Do they like sweet things? Do they like umami? Do they like salty, etc., etc.? So it really has got to begin even before school. And that's one of the really important things, I think, that Obesity Australia's addressing over this next little bit. People want to add to that in any way. So it's got to be early, really early.
I think
Ange.
Don, my comment would be with the kitchen garden program, it's about what's appropriate for the child at the age. Sure. So the learning experience for children in the 8 to 11-year-old age group is all about Stephanie's philosophy, which is make it fun, make it engaging, but most importantly, empower the children so they do it themselves. And that personal success and self-esteem follows, and that is exactly why the children want to eat their food, but also share that pride with their friends and say, try this food. And it is all about doing it for themselves and not being told what to eat.
Hello, my name's Amber, and as a mother of primary school age children, I guess maybe to Kendra and Stephanie or whoever, be a question about how you could instigate, or the best ways to instigate a change in the culture in a school, that healthy food culture, when you have perhaps a school environment that's very focused around the old school type tuck shop where lollies are essential parts and icy poles, and the whole sort of thought that parents are saying what's wrong with a lolly, there's nothing wrong with lollies, it's a treat for the kids once a week. But how to start that, I guess start a change in the culture in the school that focuses more on healthy eating, that you're not trying to do anything radical to, upset children or families.
Yep. I think for us it's about working with all the stakeholders in a school, to use that word, and particularly the teaching staff. So with the Kitchen Garden program, we very much focus on the educational outcomes that happen as a result of food education. As far as engaging parents go, children are the best ambassadors I've ever met in my life, the best advocates for something that's good. And as a parent, I find my children are continually advocating to me about how I should be eating, living, breathing and doing everything else. So giving the children themselves the experience is a great place to start, and they will buy in very, very quickly because it is fun. Certainly working with a strong principal has been critical for us. The principal is the leader of the school, no doubt about it, and if the principal is enthusiastic about the well-being of the children and can see that actually a tuck shop does not need to be a revenue generator, number one, it needs to be a source of well-being and a good experience for children, and the revenue will follow from good fresh food. So it's really about getting everybody together and finding those people within a school and getting them to form a group. And that happens in every school we've worked with. They start with a committee of really inspired and passionate people, and then we assist them and help them to spread the word.
And that's the same as that's the journey we went on at Mentone Park, really, was building the whole culture through the whole community, and it really was about education.
Yes.
And the peer pressure is huge,
yes.
as Stephanie was saying, that the kids actually pressure each other now if they don't have a healthy lunch, if they do bring something that's not good. So, and we do have education programs around the food and the nutrition every year as well. So it's embedded in everything that we do in the school. It's not
The back.
Yeah. Not just that you do cooking once a week or buy lunch on a Friday, it's a whole school culture.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Anderson. I'm a recent graduate dietitian from Monash University. I had a couple of questions for the panel. Firstly, I guess, what would you say is the sustainability of outcomes with programs such as the Kitchen Garden program compared to, I guess, the taxing approach, or where you'd provide monetary incentives? And my second question would be, how can health professionals such as myself get involved in lobbying for, I guess, the generational approach to improving food outcomes? How can we be involved in this lobbying for these sorts of programs?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
I think that any complex issue requires multiple approaches, so there really needs to be a mixture. Something like an early intervention program around food education in primary schools is critical because, as we said, the children will become advocates. The long-term sustainability of the change as well, I guess that's why Stephanie chose the 8 to 11-year-old age group, because that is that critical habit-forming stage of life. So if you give children that pleasurable experience at that age, they will continue to fall back to that as their default habit. So that's definitely the theory behind the program. I think as far as the taxing on food products goes, that's probably a bit out of our sphere and our brief, but I do know from the work that I've seen on the Preventive Health Task Force that it's certainly a strategy that is very popular, and whether or not that will flow through, I guess from an economic sense, it makes sense
to make more expensive what causes a huge health cost at the end of the day.
Yeah.
James.
A number of tweets have asked is there a hope that with programs like Stephanie Alexander's and the Mentone School that children will take the good habits home and educate their parents?
Well, it's about children taking the food habits home and then influencing parents. We have so much anecdotal evidence, in fact stories is now one of the biggest activities that our team does, and that is write the stories, because they are so commonplace and they're happening everywhere around Australia, and we're finding children going home and lobbying parents on the shopping list, creating their own gardens, asking mum, dad to help create the garden, and also wanting to cook. So I guess the answer is yes.
And I have never been to a school without a parent coming up to me, not only to say lovely thank yous, which is always nice, but to say, you have no idea how this has changed the behaviour of my son or my daughter. They are so much more interested. They are willing to try something they've never seen before. They make suggestions when we go shopping. They get on the phone to their grandparents and say, guess what we did today? The parent says with astonishment, you know, this is making a difference to my child. And I try not to roll my eyes. Of course it's making a difference.
Hi, my name is Carly Tonoli. I just wanted to ask the panellists, many schools don't take the approach of Kendra's school, and they actually limit the amount of time that children have to eat. They dictate when children can and can't eat, which is contrary to really what's best for us from what research says. And I'm just wondering, to what extent do you think that plays a role in children's attitudes towards food?
I can't see.
Kendra, you're getting a lot of stuff.
We have a discussion about this quite regularly, especially around the fruit snack in the morning, the kids, what they need and how it helps them with their thinking and so on in the morning. And we often compare to, we also say that often kids that are home, they can go for hours without eating, and when they're engaged in something. So I don't say I have an answer to that, but we actually have that conversation quite regularly. And the nice thing about the CAFÉ on a Friday, of course, is that there's a whole hour that it's open, that the kids can go in and out and sit down and have a meal and have something to eat and chat with their friends. So they're not limited in the time that they do eat. But I don't have an answer to the impact of it, but it is something we discuss regularly around that routine of when we eat and the importance of it and the impact of it.
My name is Paul Williams, son of a chef and a child health sister and father of 3 young adults with rather different diets. But my question comes out of having attended the first session this morning about feeding a world of 10 billion people and doing so sustainably. Do any of the panel have any particular comments about education of children regarding food choices re genetically modified foods?
I can say in our classroom programs, so every year at the start of the year, we do a Kids Connect program, which is also about how we keep healthy. So every year there is a discussion, and obviously from prep to year 6 that changes, but certainly in the year 5, 6 there is debate around that, and also because our teacher in that area is our passionate leader of the environment studies at our school. So we do have debate and discussion around it with our older students, and they do research projects around those matters.
I really like the idea of having seasonal food that is locally produced, because in the end we're going to have food miles, air miles will have to be added to the true cost of food. And we're importing, the kind of food we're importing now is overwhelmingly heavily processed. It's not exclusively, but we import almost all our soft drink, for example. I'd be quite happy if somehow that could stop. We'd have a huge improvement in health.
I think, for many years, plant scientists have been allowing food sources, corn, for instance, to be naturally genetically modified. I think what people are concerned about are artificial genetic manipulation. If you look at the progenitor of sweet corn. It's unrecognisable. It's a horrible little weed.
Hi, my name's Sarah Hobday North and I'm an architect, and as well as being a lover of food, I'm also interested in the spaces where we grow, prepare and consume food. And I'm interested to hear from the panel more reflections on, for example, the creation of the CAFÉ space in the canteen that came the Kids CAFÉ, and also perhaps the trend in restaurants towards benches and table eating. Is that a nostalgia for our kitchen table that we don't get at home and we have to go out for that as well?
I'd have to say that as an architect, you'd be seeing that eating and food preparation spaces are going in two completely opposite directions at once. So we're building all these towers in the CBD which maybe have 1 or 2 burners and a tiny sink, and it makes it very difficult. But at the same time, we have people designing and building kitchens worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think that the Arga stove has a bigger place in Australia than ever. They're selling more than they've ever before, and a lot of them are actually wood-fired now. So we have these things going in different directions, I think is a fair summation. And I know that one of the reasons why young people are eating more in restaurants now is because that's become their social space. It may have been more a bar in the past, but the restaurant has become more of a social space for young people.
I think one of the reasons why the older people are perhaps eating less in restaurants is that you can't hear yourself think. Restaurants, you're an architect. Restaurants have got, walls that bounce sound off, and it's hopeless.
And you can't read the menu, it's too dark.
Oh, no, I can read the menu. Especially if it's in Braille. Go on.
Hi, my name's Emily Dooley and I work for the Raising Children Network at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute. And I actually was brought up in a small country town, and I was just wondering, they're both great programs, but I was wondering how, your plans and sort of, do you have a list of schools you're addressing and things like that, and is it something that schools can come to you, or you're just sending people out to certain areas, and how you plan to get to everyone?
Absolutely. I'll absolutely answer that one. As an organisation, we've partnered with the Department of Health and Ageing and Medibank, as Stephanie mentioned before. So we have been funded to train up to an additional 400 schools between now and the end of 2015. And those schools can be anywhere in this country as long as they have a primary curriculum. So for instance, we work with schools, as Stephanie mentioned, we've worked with Tiwi College, we've worked with Flinders Island, we've worked over in the Margaret River area, Cooper Pedy, the NPY lands, the APY lands, and everywhere. So this program is now spread right across this country. What we do as an organisation is we look for schools in a cluster group so we can make the most of the financial assistance we have from government, make it, work for the schools, but also create that local network so they can share their learnings together and become strong together. Because our job is really to do ourselves out of a job and to, empower schools to embed this kind of education in their curriculum.
But we want to get that 400 up further and further and further.
Definitely. Good evening, I'm Leanne McCoy and I'm from the Brunswick Montessori Children's House. My question is, it's a preschool that I'm part of and all of this is primary, and I would argue that it actually starts at 3 with those young ones because they can snack when they like, they can go out and pick a lettuce leaf, they can wash it in our new little kitchen area, and I'm just wondering if there is some age group that is, or some foundation that is assisting preschools, Stephanie, or...
Well, there's certainly many, many preschools that have expressed a great deal of interest, and there are many preschools that have developed their own form of this program, have their own garden, have cooking times together and sit around together and eat lovely things. We simply didn't have the money to develop a universal program. It would have to be one program, and not so much one fit, well, I suppose it was one fit all, so that's why we took these middle years in the primary school. But I'd be the first to say there's masses of scope for this, for education about food, about growing things, about the environment, to be part of every child's life from, well, like John says, before birth, but I would definitely say birth onwards.
And John, can I add to that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing. We, as an organisation, we share our resources through our website. They're at a cost-only basis because we're a not-for-profit. We need to pay our staff. But basically, a lot of preschools buy our manual, which is a bit of a bible as to how to run the classes. Now, it's been written for primary schools, but a lot of preschools do use that information and then modify to suit the children of the age group that they're working with.
And I'll just add to that as well, because Ange mentioned about clusters of schools, and we work very much as networks of schools now in government education particularly, and we have a very strong relationship with our local preschool, so they actually come in and do gardening at our school, and our grade 5 and 6 students take them and talk to them about the garden. So, hook in with your local primary school and see what resources they've got, and you might be able to partner up.
James.
This is a tweet directed for Karen, and would it be seen as demeaning to prescribe healthy food to lower SES people, provoking a similar reaction to income management schemes?
To income management. I actually think it's an idea. There's a program in the United States called the WIC program, Women, Infants and Children, and it has been designed for very underprivileged families and pregnant women, lactating women and infants up to the age of 5. And people feel actually that it is their right to get that food. And to be part of the program, they must be linked in with part of the health system, so that they aren't just getting it. Their children are followed up, the mothers are followed up, and it has to be shown to be effective. So it really should be seen as something that people have a right to, that it shouldn't be seen. This is an investment in the future. We have a real funny response to helping people like this. We say it's completely the family responsibility, and I say to people, you can't choose your parents often, and you can't choose their circumstances. And are we going to punish children in particular because of the very deprived circumstances that they live in that are not their fault? So I would see it more as a positive nation-building exercise. We used to, when I was growing up, we got our free milk at school, and many countries provide free school lunches and free school meals, healthy meals. So I actually think this has to be seen and would have to be argued as such. And it's very difficult in our partisan climate at the moment, but it would need to be argued as an investment in the future.
We've got time for 2 more questions and answers.
Yeah.
1, 2.
Okay.
My name's Nick. I'm a father and a general practitioner, and I'd like to ask in regards to the amount of regulation around food hygiene, which are arguably excessive and certainly in stark contrast to the absent regulation in regards to sugar and fat content in foods. I'm aware of some small-scale programs in kindergartens and schools which have really encountered difficulties because of concerns around food handling and food hygiene and disallowing sharing of plates of cut fruit and so forth. I'm wondering whether your school programs have encountered similar difficulties and how you've managed to negotiate that.
Yeah.
Okay. The philosophy behind the kitchen garden program is that the kitchen facility in particular very much resembles a home, so that children do not have a sterile experience around preparing food. Because the kitchen space is not a commercial space, then there is not the stringent food handling requirements that you would find if you were selling the food at, say, a fete or something like that. So really the kitchens are a home-style cooking class space, a community education program, if you like. So each school finds that in their local council there are certainly different requirements around permits for the kitchen space, and we certainly learn a lot ourselves and support schools and feed that back out to the various schools. But the answer is overwhelmingly no. Around the actual kitchen classes, no, the food hygiene issue is not a problem. We do support the schools to make sure that the kitchen, or schools understand how to keep a kitchen clean. And that is a big issue.
And children wash their hands.
Children wash their hands. That is absolutely part of the process. So the children will walk in, they'll wash their hands, they'll have a clean apron to wear, and there are clean tea towels to use. So there is a strong focus on keeping the space clean and safe.
Don't wear plastic gloves.
No.
You've got to touch it.
Kendra,
And that's the same for us with the kids cooking program, that it's not been an issue, but because we do run the CAFÉ, we are regulated by the local council and we have all the appropriate trained staff and certificates, and we get audited regularly, so we've sort of got two different things happening.
I think it's probably a political issue. Regulating food preparation by restaurateurs and so on is seen as very positive, but actually the alternative is seen as the nanny state intruding into your private space, and therefore it's not politically acceptable. It's, targeting what can be done, and I think it's often overkill. We've got one last question.
Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a stay-at-home mum with like a 3.5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. I grew up on a dairy farm in New Zealand with a vegetable garden that was probably the size of my whole entire backyard. My question to you is, in today's time of diminishing backyards, what can parents do in a practical stance to expose their kids to this, to growing your own food and educating them on where food comes from when you've only got a really small amount of usable space that's often, not necessarily fantastic for growing vegetables?
Well, I just would say you have to do it too. I mean, the children that get involved because you love working in the garden and you love kneading bread or you love stirring something in a bowl, and it's from the time that they can possibly hold the wooden spoon or have their own trowel, they're there and they love to do it because you're doing it. You're valuing this activity.
Also small spaces, gardens.
And anyone can, I mean, goodness me, small spaces, you can grow so much in a small space. You just have a cherry tomato in a pot if you can't do anything else, but mostly you can do more than that.
Everybody can come in.
There are schools in this program, probably the biggest garden in this program. A school is fortunate enough to have almost a hectare of land next to them that was given to them to use. The smallest space would be in schools in Sydney, in the city Sydney, and those schools may have an area half the size of where we are. Half the size of where we are up here, maybe even a third or a quarter. And it's all about using productive space. So raised beds are very common in the school grounds. I've seen schools plant things in the polystyrene boxes. It's really up to the imagination, I guess, as to how you can make it happen. But as Stephanie said, and she herself is a big proponent of growing in pots, there are many ways that it can be done. So have a look on our website if you like, kitchengardenfoundation.org.au, and there's lots of pictures of how schools grow food in very small spaces.
No, I was just going to say the same thing about raised garden beds, old tyres we use for growing potatoes and things. So lots of ways you can get around it.
My wife and I have
community gardens. Sorry, and a lot of community gardens are sprouting now as well. Or get involved in your local school. They're always looking for volunteers.
My wife and I have got 2 little raised beds, kitchen garden beds. Total surface probably 10 square metres. We cannot keep up with, we don't grow everything, but with the range of things that just grow like crazy. In my car downstairs, there's an enormous bucket of silver beet to give to my daughter-in-law on the way home. And if anybody wants silver beet, you're welcome to come. It's gone completely feral. It's time to wind up. I'd like to ask the audience to thank all our speakers and panellists. On behalf of the program and Fiona, and as an alumnus of Melbourne University, I was an undergraduate for 8 years and a graduate student for 3.5 years. So it's a long time between drinks. I'd like to thank the sponsors of the program, whose advertisements you saw earlier, Vic Health, Club Melbourne Ambassador Program, and the City of Melbourne. And I understand that the festival team is going to present the speakers with gifts. I don't think that's one of them. This is Mike Flatley.
Hello.
As they say in Japan, Flatley will get you everywhere.
Thank you.
One for me. Oh, bless you. Thank you. You going to talk?
No, I'm just going to have a photo.
There's a photo opportunity coming up apparently. We're done. No photos?
No, there's photos.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.